Hello and welcome to Surveyor Says, the podcast from the National Society of Professional Surveyors. Each week, we bring you fascinating guests that are involved in the profession of surveying. We cover a lot of ground, including Table A Talk with Gary Kent, Point of Order with the NSPS Joint Government Affairs Team, Future Focus, highlighting current and future leaders of the profession, and everything survey-related in between. Thanks for joining us here on the podcast, and hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Surveyor Says. Hello and welcome to another episode of Surveyor Says. Once again, this is your host, Tim Burch, and we are still on location. We're still eating a lot of pierogies and taking in the Warsaw nightlife, except we now have we've gotten through the FIG Congress 2022, and I thought it would be very appropriate, kind of like Narelle Underwood. This is another, and this I got to be careful to say this. I've been LinkedIn stalking for quite a number of years because of her work in FIG, her work, and we'll get into what VCSP means. But it's Claire Buxton, and originally from New Zealand, residing in Canada, and she'll give us a little background on that. But like I said, I've been watching this young woman's career for several years, and has been quite impressed, quite intrigued, and so to meet her in person's been really good. So, welcome, Claire. Thank you for taking time after this long week to sit and just to have the chat we've had to date, and just so far today, and really just kind of catch up on a lot of things.
Thanks for having me.
Well, okay, so let's start first. FIG. Why are you here in Warsaw? What have you been doing in FIG that brings you to Warsaw now that we're finally back in person? What have your roles have been?
Since the start of my involvement?
Yes.
Okay, so I got involved in 2016. The working week was in Christchurch, New Zealand, and my good friend Melissa Harrington was on the local organising committee.
Yes, Melissa, yes. Shout out to Melissa.
Yeah. So I really heard about FIG through her and was really interested in sticking around and going to that working week. So that's where I first learned about international land holding perspectives rather than New Zealand's way of New Zealanders holding land rights.
Sure. So
that's what got me inspired into getting into FIG. And then I had already been volunteering for Survey and Spatial New Zealand, then NZIS. So I, through Mel and through the Young Surveyors Network, helped a little bit for the Istanbul Working Week, just a workshop.
Sure.
And investing in yourself to get others to invest in you.
That was in 2018.
Yes.
To Istanbul, right?
Yes, and we also jointly wrote a paper together on will technology ever replace the human touch in land rights.
I think that's probably where I first was made aware of your presence in the surveying world. So I thought, okay. But so yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so that was like a socio-technical paper that Mel and I wrote, her in Colorado and me in New Zealand. And then since then, and during that, I was inspired by the chair at the time, Eva Maria Unger, to kind of help with the Volunteer Community Surveyor Program. So a pilot had been run in 2017, and in Istanbul there was a roundtable on how to continue and scale up the program sustainably. And so I had already put in place plans to do a workshop in New Zealand on the volunteer toolkit. And then Mel took over the ranks, Melissa, and needed some support to create a bit of a plan for the Volunteer Community Surveyor Program, VCSP. So that's where I came in, and then after some strategy building and some team building and some networking to get more partnerships.
Right.
We have got to a point now where we're ready to scale up again. We're still making tangible outcomes even during the pandemic, and so I am representing today the new lead of the VCSP, Roshni Sharma from Sydney, Australia.
Yes.
You've probably heard her name.
Another one that's on my bucket list to meet someday, because I think she's a great force for the future as well, now and the future. But yes, good.
Yes, so I'm wearing a few hats, but that's my voluntary hat, and I'm going to report back to her some really critical conversations we've had throughout the week.
Sure.
So that's that, and my paid work is with Underhill Geomatics in Burnaby, like Vancouver area.
Right. Okay.
In BC, and they've helped me to come here today. So this week.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah.
So what's your daily technically paying job? What does Claire do for employment? I mean, what is your job there?
So my title is project manager. My first title coming into that was party chief, and that's not a term used outside of North America. So my friends thought I was just a party person at the front.
Yeah.
Love that term. And there I have, I don't necessarily stick to my role description and try to help in terms of conversations around streamlining and general strategic conversations. But my everyday job is managing engineering surveying projects.
Nice.
Coaching other young surveyors on workflows, using StarNet for adjustments, good documentation processes, and my other paid, like what I'm trying to get more into is the land surveying side of things to transfer my license from New Zealand to Canada.
Sure. Well, good. One thing I want to drop back to is to talk a little bit more about the VCSP and some of the things that go on with that volunteer program, because to me it's almost like a little bit of a Peace Corps with a little bit more of a direct message and direct initiative, because I think that's something that I know in the United States and probably a lot more developed countries, there's more assumption of title rights. And so can we talk a little bit more about that and how the VCSP really kind of helps with some of those things?
Yeah. So the VCSP, if you have to say it 17 times to get it right, it's hard to get it around your mouth. But so we have a kind of two-pronged overarching goals, and the program exists as a collaborative global outreach program for young surveyors to volunteer their time and skills to humanitarian and environmental crises. So we map the world a better place is our tagline. We bring our combined global energy into the fight for two of the most important issues our generation faces today, and that's climate crises and lack of equal access to land rights. So to us, I guess, and to many professionals and experts, land rights and climate crises are very much intertwined, and I'll get to that soon. But what we do with the VCSP is we host those wisdom workshops that I think you're aware of.
Oh, yes.
And part of the idea with that is to introduce that exact concept to those who have the privilege to have strong, secure land systems in their own country,
right,
that doesn't exist in other countries.
Right.
And those in those other countries that don't have that system to learn how it could be done in a pro-poor approach.
Sure. That's
using land tools, for example, like cadasters or GLT and
right.
STTM. So we introduce those through hands-on sessions in the workshops. We have volunteers come back and talk about their experience, and we have dedicated sessions to tenure security using fit-for-purpose techniques. So attendees to that would receive, actually attendees and those who actually do the workshop and
right.
do the MOOC beforehand and actually finish it,
right.
receive a certificate. And when we host and run in-country deployments, that's when the certificate comes in handy, because we know that young surveyor
right.
has experience, or actually just general understanding of the concepts they could use.
Of the whole concept, exactly. Good.
And that's in a more, hopefully, easy way to access, because they're online and they're not hugely academic like you'd see a lot of at FIG working weeks. They're
right.
more entry level
right.
maybe. So then when it comes to implementation of those programs, there's existing partners already, large organisations that are already implementing land tenure security projects in countries with NGOs on the ground.
Right.
So there's no need for us to recreate the wheel. Maybe once we grow a bit bigger, we can start doing that and have our own programs, but we need to use FIG's network of experts for that.
Right.
What we do is we try to remove barriers for volunteers to actually get their boots on the ground and get into it. So that's whether it's raising funds, general coordination. We have try and communicate the VCSP as well as we can, network with the right partners, and have a lot of online meetings to do so.
Sure.
But back to the piece on, in New Zealand and in America and Canada, where I work, there is a lack of tenure security for the Indigenous people. So, and the Indigenous people, it's recognised, are the safeguard of a lot of our forests, and our forests are carbon capture, havens. So that's the connection to the environmental and climate crisis.
Oh, sure. No, that makes complete sense. It really does.
So one of the sessions I went to yesterday was Stand for Her Land, and that's an international campaign to increase women's access to land rights.
Okay.
I am hoping that we can do more with Stand for Her Land with VCSP as another partner to help us on the ground. Well,
I'd first heard that term this week, so I'm not sure how long that campaign has been around. So if it's been around longer than this week, I've been completely oblivious to it. So I'm hoping that it's somewhat new, maybe not.
I don't know enough about how new it is. I think it's been around a while.
Okay.
I had heard about it and wanted to get engaged, but it took till yesterday for me to be in the room to see that there's a need and an ability for us to help each other.
Well, considering women are half the population around the entire
51%.
Earth. Yeah.
We're actually more than half.
Yeah, actually you're a majority. That's true. I guess while we're talking about the majority of the planet, and we're here talking about, with FIG Congress and talking about surveying, I guess we should talk about kind of I won't say a watershed moment. Today we found out that the next FIG president will in fact be a woman, which is exciting. Not that there has been a woman in the past, Chrissy from Greece, but this is, and I hate to say it, but even in the last 4 to 8 years, things have changed and things are different, and it is more dynamic to have. It's Diane Dumashi from England, part of RICS, will be the next president for 4 years. FIG. It's exciting, and it's going to bring a new dynamic to not just FIG, but I think to the surveying profession worldwide. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Not only a woman, but a woman of colour as well.
This is true.
Yeah, very exciting to see. One of the things I presented on this week was on how we as the VCSP team have communicated, tried to increase equity, belonging and inclusion. And as part of that, I did a bit of research I don't know if you've heard of Catalyst.
Yes.
You have?
Yes.
So they did some research in April this year on internationally 1,100 companies, not in surveying, but generally.
Generally, yes.
Of management and women in management. And the statistics are something like there's 37% of women in management, then it goes down to 29% in senior management, and 23% in executive management.
Right.
So you see a clear drop-off between management and senior management, and we've known about this drop-off for a long time. It's improving, but it's still not going to be quick enough. I think the stat was that it's going to take 100 years for us to make equal the pay gap come together. So yeah, having women like Diane Dumashi in a leadership position is great for that role model that she will bring to many young surveyors, young female surveyors, young surveyors of ethnic backgrounds that are non-white. And I'm really excited to be part of growth that's happening in this space. So.
Oh, it is. It's definitely, it's going to make for more exciting times, because I think it brings a little more emphasis, a little more enthusiasm and encouragement. And that's one thing that excites me, and one reason I like talking to young women like you, like Narelle, like the Anna Rios and the Sarah Walkers and others around the world, that it's just hoping that young woman student hears this and says, wow, I hear what Claire has accomplished. It is possible for me to do these things, or what Narelle has accomplished, and it is possible for me to do these things, because unfortunately a lot of kids grow up these days that they're told they can do anything, well, until they try to do it, and then there are barriers.
Well, can I touch on that? So,
yes, please.
So earlier you called me a trailblazer, and that's a very big term to use. It's not the trail that I've burnt. Someone else has burnt that for me. So I'm following in the footsteps of some giants. But when I entered surveying, I came to it through an open day at Otago University. John Hanna was the dean at the time, and he said that there's not enough representation of women in surveying, and that was really something that got me into surveying. And I was brought up to believe that the world is my oyster. I can do whatever I want. I'm one of those kids.
Right.
Thanks, Mum and Dad. And that has been true. I have been able to do what I wanted. But I have to acknowledge that I've got a level of privilege, and I'm already at a certain point that I can springboard from. So one thing I want to make sure of is that I'm bringing those that have less privilege to step up from with me.
Right.
I had another point. It's gone.
Well,
anyway,
let me ask you about privilege real quick, because that obviously privilege has become a hot topic in a lot of different environments, and I've heard several people, especially men and women of color, explain it better to me than anything. It's not so much about the privilege; I've had less barriers than others. That it's been easier, that they haven't been, whether it's economic, whether it's racial, whether it's not necessarily the privilege itself, that they don't see me and say, "Oh, Timothy, come on in." No, it's the lack of barriers that others have had to come over. So I agree, and you're right. Yeah.
So I guess I don't feel as comfortable talking about privilege in that sense, obviously.
Right.
I am a very white girl. Like, my heritage is Scottish and English. But I do have friends that have opened up to me about the barriers that they've faced being a person of colour in surveying. And I know that from my experience now, as I get into that middle management position, there is this glass ceiling that I can't see, and that's a barrier for me. And because of having networks in women in surveying, I'm able to sort of navigate that. I also have a very good coach and mentor who is a senior man back in New Zealand, Mark, who helped me understand his perspective as a business owner on equality. Some of the, I guess, barriers related to, we use the word diversity a lot as a trigger word, and I'm learning a lot more from Roshni. Actually, she did a chapter on this in Commission 3 ebook.
She's wise beyond her years.
She is, yeah. She's got an old soul. So we talk about diversity a lot, and we hire diversity, and we're getting a bit better, I think, in the numbers. I don't know them, probably not fast enough. But once a person is hired of a minority group, we're kind of missing a beat, I think, with belonging and inclusion and equity. And again, Roshni's better to read her paper, but how I understand it and how I see it is that, yes, you're in the room, but you're still in a room with people that don't have the same background as you. So how do you make sure that people of minority groups are feeling welcomed into that group?
Right.
How do you make sure that they are given equal opportunity, even if they don't speak up for, say they want a promotion, but because of their cultural upbringing, it's not appropriate to ask for that promotion. It has to be done another way. Yeah, I did have another point too. I keep going
That's
blank.
okay. That's okay. No, because it's and you're exactly right. You and I sitting here as white, and I'm the same way. I've got a tremendous Scottish Irish background. I was just telling somebody a story. My daughter did the 23andMe DNA test for Christmas a year ago, and because she wanted to know where we came from, and I've now come to find out I don't have a German background. I've got this tremendous UK background. But anyway, you're right, and and to take it even further, I mean, me sitting here as a white man, I don't have the lenses that you do. I don't have the same lenses that And I'll share this one very quickly. And I don't remember her name, but it was a young one of the young surveyor students that got one of the grants to come. I think she's from Zimbabwe, but she had to go to South Africa to get the Polish.
Shirley. Yeah.
Yes, to get the Polish visa, and then she flew to, I think, India, then to Dubai, got hung up in Dubai. And then, it's just barriers like that.
Yeah.
That, and that's on top of being in foreign lands as a young black woman. That's, I can't imagine.
She's incredible. She
is incredible.
If I could kind of tie that in, so Shirley
Yes.
Tendai Chambonza, she's from Zimbabwe, and she's the incoming vice chair of the Young Surveyors Network.
Okay.
She had to represent herself as the incoming vice chair, as well as Vera, who's the chair of the Young Surveyors Network, and she has done a phenomenal job this week of being pulled in all sorts of directions and representing so well and speaking so well at very late notice.
Right.
So I think that kind of circles back to the story I wanted to tell, which is actually a joke that Deborah Francis White said in a podcast she did for years. I think it's still going, called The Guilty Feminist. It's about a concept a story where there's two people approach a door, and one is a white straight man and one is a young Asian woman. And actually, no, they're the same age, same experience level, same background technically. And they come up to a door, and there's a bouncer at the door. And the bouncer says to the man, "Come on in. You're welcome." And then the bouncer says to the young woman, "Can I see your ID, please?" And he proceeds to ask her some questions and say, what's your date of birth? And rah-de-rah, and then after a while he lets her in. In the meantime, the man has gone through two other doors that this woman has to come up to. And then it continues through many doors that she has to start, she comes to a bouncer and she says, "I'd like to get into the door, please." And he says, "Well, what's it worth to you?" And she then has to negotiate her way through the door. And so she gets through all these doors, and meanwhile, this other man has gone through 10 doors, and she's through the third. And so in that scenario, I'm going to tie it back, is those people have the same technical background, they have the same qualifications. That man has got through those doors because he has no barriers. That woman has had to get through those doors and create a whole lot of soft skills that man wouldn't have. So if you hire that woman, you're going to get a more well-rounded person in that role that has had to create those communication skills and come across adversity, which will make them a hugely responsive leader. So back to Shirley, she's had to adapt so fast and come across those barriers with her visa, along with other young surveyors from Nigeria and Ghana, and learn how to navigate that with grace. And it's great to see her do it.
Oh, it is, and the smile on their faces, they're so enthusiastic. But yeah, it's like I said, it's not so much our any kind of privilege. It's the lack of barriers, and just the amount of barriers they've had along the way and continue to have. That you're right, and it's and until we get more, we break some of these barriers down, and we get more more equity in the workplace, these conditions are going to continue. So, yeah, it's interesting. That's very good. So
we did talk about this before as well, though, offline, that you were saying, I don't want to get up and speak, and I don't feel comfortable about it, but we're both advocates and we can be allies. So I think it's a good platform you have here to be feeling like you can speak about it to your contemporaries.
Well, we should, because we do support it, and it is about having the best people, that want to be there, that want to contribute, that really are impassioned about the work we do. It doesn't matter what race they are, what gender they are, any of that. It's you want the best people around you.
Yeah.
You want your best teammates.
Exactly.
And if you and I, as white people, can't be there to champion those causes, well, I think there's definitely something wrong with the system. So we need to be able to speak our minds as well. I think so. We talked about so much offline beforehand, but I guess being here in Warsaw for the FIG Congress, what other things have you seen this week that really, I guess, enthuse you to want to do more and keep going with some of these actions and some of these platforms that you feel so strongly about?
Well, I think it's been the passion that I'm seeing in other young surveyors and younger young surveyors, and I have to be careful here. I don't want to set myself up for committing to too much. I have a long list of things I need to sit down and reflect on for my next move, but there's at least 3 or 4 young surveyors that want to set up their own networks in their countries because they don't have a Young Surveyors Network. And in fact, in Canada, I don't think there's a Young Surveyors Network.
Not that I'm aware
of. And now I'm setting myself up here. But I want to empower other young surveyors in Canada to get their own network. France, Namibia, and Finland, they're all 3 young women wanting to set up a Young Surveyors Network. And I think we're seeing more and more, actually, the voluntary roles in leadership are held by women. We need to make sure that there's gender balance, and we also get more male young surveyors involved as well. But yeah, that's been the biggest inspiration, I guess, and the common thread I'm hearing is that we need to use our networks and strengthen our networks better with the VCSP and with Young Surveyors Network.
I do want to delve into that I guess not necessarily briefly, we can talk about it as long as we need to, but women in surveying. And we know that there are parts of the world where women do have a little more gender equality, more gender balance. Europe is for the most part is reasonably good about that. But obviously there's places, the US, Australia, New Zealand, such, there's still that gender imbalance. I really think, and I think this was something we touched on, was how those women in those more balanced areas can really do some good to help not really to help with the balance it out, but help mentor. And help bring some effective experience and opportunities to other women that are seeking those same challenges. I don't have the answers. Well, but I do have ideas. We have 5 young women in surveying in my class. I think there was 3 when I left uni. Out of 60. So the numbers are still low in New Zealand. I think we need to start with measuring, because we don't know in surveying what the representation is by gender. I think the term's disaggregated data. We need disaggregated data on our own FIG. I think it's a good starting point. And that will take champions from each region and each country to gather and push for. But that doesn't have to be just women doing that. This is a society. All genders need to be pitching in.
Exactly. So I think we just spoke with a woman from Germany who agreed that the German case is that there's no gender imbalance that she's aware of. So she's in a position of knowing what it's like and can mentor. There's a lot of talk about mentoring this Congress, and I think that's going to be I hope that's going to be a strong focus of the next leaders of FIG. So there's two ways of going about it. We continue to build on the pilot that was run in Africa region for the mentoring at a large scale basis, but I think on a micro scale, I have the ability to share my knowledge on how a Young Surveyors network could be created, or any network. So, I can reach out to some of the people I've met this week that want to set up their own network and have an online session every 6 weeks or something, and just try and, it won't take much preparation, but have a conversation around how we've done it and how they're going and what they can do next.
Right.
There's already resources that exist around how to do that, but I think we need to keep them up to date.
I would agree.
I think it's going to take a really strong leader and second follower to create a woman in surveying network for FIG, and it's going to take measuring and finding out what our baseline is.
Sure.
Yeah, and connecting with existing programs around women in surveying. I know internationally there's some that exist.
Well, and I got to be honest with you, it's just something I'm sitting here thinking about, and talking about the woman from Germany, and how there are parts of Europe where there isn't such an imbalance of men and women in surveying, but I'm also now kind of cross-correlating with that's, to me, is also some areas of the world where surveying is a little more of a respected profession as well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of amazing now that I think about it, and not that anybody's done any official studies or real looks at it, but that's something I've always appreciated about hearing about surveying in Europe, that there's a much higher regard for surveyors here in Europe than there are in other places of the world.
Where else has a really good example is Nigeria. So when you become a licensed surveyor in Nigeria, you change your title to Surveyor Buxton, I would be.
Okay.
Which is incredible. I would love to be able to change my title to Surveyor. There's another good example of that's a real promotion of that.
I guess I didn't realize that. I've now that you say that, I've seen that in a lot of their titles, but I thought maybe that was just part of their culture to help not the hierarchy of being able to know who does what, but that is an honorable title.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, anything else from the Congress this week that while we're on our little soapboxes, we can get out and beat on a little bit?
I have got one last point, and it's around mental fitness. So, thank you. Kwabena Asiyama, who's the outgoing Young Surveyors chair, he said to remind everyone that Young Surveyors are their partners, not helpers. And what I'm noticing, and you'll notice as well, and you're one of them, is that there's a small group of volunteers that get dragged into all sorts of initiatives because we stick our necks out.
Right. And
in order to make FIG sustainable, Young Surveyors Network and VCSP sustainable, the Women's Network, everything, it's going to take a team, and we have to be careful that we're not selecting the same people every time, because we're going to get burnout. And I think on the helpers not partners, partners not helpers thing, it's, you're a young surveyor, please type up this letter for me. You're a young surveyor, you can do all our social media. Yes, we can do the social media piece, but you also want to be talking with us about what are our perspectives. As you said, over the last 4 years, we've got these online leaders that are coming through that have been through the pandemic and growing. That's the way to transform our industry, I think.
Agreed.
and on mental health as well. Shirley Tendai Chapunza touched on this, and she called it quiet quitting.
Yes,
you've
that's
probably
a
heard it.
big trend coming around. Yes.
Yeah, and I saw something recently on LinkedIn about quiet quitting is talked about in a real negative way, and blaming it on the people leaving. But often it's the people that are leaving that, they are passionate people to start with, but then there's poor leadership that they can no longer continue to work in that place. So I think in terms of leadership as an industry, we should be looking at who's leading, how are they leading with empathy, have they got the skills to be managing people, or have they got to that position because they had technical skills and got forced into a people management role?
Exactly. And that's something that, I've been talking to Michelle from Australia Consulting Surveyors Network, and talking about the business of surveying versus the technical side. And you just hit on it. Because somebody is so technically competent, they do get promotion, and all of a sudden they're in charge of people, and they have no people skills, they have no managerial skills, they have no business skills, because they're a great, competent surveyor, but they've been promoted based upon those skills and not the ones that they should be doing. And in turn, you're right, they're managing people that they don't have any skills, to have a skill set to do, and the people under them are suffering. And they're the ones that actually end up paying the price.
Yeah.
So you're right, and the profession needs to do a better job creating that skill set, assessing that skill set, and helping those people that want to assume those roles with that skill set.
Yeah.
So we've got to do a better job of training ourselves to make sure that we're equipped to do that.
Yeah, and it's not always just training as well. I think this ties back to the minority groups and representation.
Yes.
If you look at the bouncer analogy that I poorly gave, is
yes.
that...
That wasn't poor, that was spot on.
Was it? Yes.
That was spot on.
I made Deborah Francis quite proud, maybe. Is that maybe looking at a person for a promotion that isn't in a senior level yet. It's maybe daunting if a person doesn't have, over 5 years experience, but
right.
They may have life experience that you've not seen them go through that's made them into a really wise person that could
exactly
have existing people skills that you don't need to train to immediately.
It's not always about the time in.
Yeah.
It is. It's exactly about that. And no, I like that you've brought this up, because it's still I still think that the mental health and worrying about each other a little bit from the emotional side is, so I won't say taboo, but somewhat hands off, because we're not supposed to know that much about each other. But
I think that's generational, though. I think it's generational. Our generation and maybe the generation below, hopefully. I haven't studied it. Because of the context that we've been brought up in,
right?
We have more open conversations around it, but that may also be my experience. In New Zealand, we kind of have it. It hasn't always been front of mind, but it's becoming more and more popular and to talk about mental fitness and mental health openly. So,
as we should.
Yeah.
As we should. Well, you know what? It was great to finally connect face to face, like I said, with even some of, I think that was what my biggest takeaway from this Congress, coming halfway around the world to meet other people from halfway around the world, for change, and meeting you in person, having these conversations has been just an absolute treat for me.
Same.
So thank you for taking the time to really talk about some, let's be honest, some difficult subjects, and the fact that there's no way to tackle these difficult subjects without laying them out and figuring out how do we handle them. So thank you for taking that time.
You're welcome.
So, well, that'll wrap us up for this week. To go back to back, Narelle Underwood and now Claire Buxton, that's like, wow. I mean, we're hitting it out of the park here. So. We got a few more that I've got on my bucket list that we'll nail down, and but Thanks for coming today, and we'll wherever you subscribe to your podcast, please hit that like button as well, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. You've been listening to the Surveyor Says podcast, brought to you by the National Society of Professional Surveyors. If you have any questions about today's episode or any other topic, please email us at info@nsps.us.com, and we are here to help. Visit our website, nsps.us.com, to learn more about our association, the programs we administer and support, our sustaining members, and information about future episodes of Surveyor Says. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, as well as our podcast host, Podbean. And remember, it's a great day to be a surveyor.